Greetings, this is Angelus DiMortio with another multiplayer build guide in Dragon Age Inquisition. Today we will be building the Hunter as a Strike Sapper. This build takes cues from the Striker and Sapper roles, which are usually in opposition. The Striker role focuses on mobility and burst damage, moving in and out of combat quickly and hitting fast but hard. The Sapper, conversely, focuses on debuffing and dealing damage over time. With this build, the Hunter is able to get in fast like the Striker, afflict enemies with damage over time like the Sapper, then hit hard and get out fast like the Striker. This creates an especially deadly class that really caters to a lot more white-knuckle playstyle, requiring quick reflexes and quick analysis of the battlefield. Let's get to the build. In the Trapping Tree, the only ability from this tree that I use in this build is Toxic Cloud. Toxic Cloud is an AoE damage over time ability that creates a cloud of noxious fumes around the Hunter with a diameter of 6 meters. Yes, there are many that are thinking about making some bathroom jokes, but we'll focus on the effect. This does 15% weapon damage per second for 8 seconds, has a 32-second cooldown, and costs a moderate 50 stamina. The upgrade, Contact Poison, stacks yet another damage over time tick on the enemy by applying poison to enemies for 8 seconds, doing 25% weapon damage. Furthermore, it also reduces the cooldown time of Toxic Cloud by a massive 5 seconds. Now, some people might think that Contact Poison simply adds 25% to the 15%, resulting in a 40% weapon damage effect. While this is somewhat correct, this is important to note the mechanics of the ability. Toxic Cloud initially only poisons enemies while they're standing in the cloud. Once they leave the area of effect of the ability, they are no longer suffering damage over time. Contact Poison adds a second and independent damage over time that will continue to damage enemies even after they leave the area of effect of Toxic Cloud. This becomes more important when I talk about passives later. In the Survival Tree, the first ability I acquire when leveling up the Hunter, and a truly useful skill in this build, is Leaping Shot. Leaping Shot sees the Hunter do a backflip while miraculously loading a handful of arrows onto his bow and loosing them in a shotgun-like fashion while still maintaining lethal velocity. It makes sense when you don't think about it. Leaping Shot not only absolutely devastates enemies at close range, it is also a useful mobility skill for buying yourself a bit of breathing room from melee enemies. It is, however, important to note that it greatly loses effectiveness at longer ranges. Leaping Shot looses 12 arrows that do 50% weapon damage each, costing a low 35 stamina and has a 12-second cooldown. Leaping Shot increases its utility with its upgrade, Rolling Draw. After miraculously loading a bunch of arrows onto his bow and firing them all with damaging force while doing a backflip, somehow this powers him up with a magical glowing arrow that does 200% damage and makes your next basic attack knock down its enemies. It makes sense in the magical video game universe, okay? Leave it alone. Quick notes on Rolling Draw. Firstly, Rolling Draw will not leave until you perform a basic attack. It lasts indefinitely if left untapped. Secondly, Rolling Draw only works with a basic attack. Abilities do not get the bonus, but also do not make it go away. Thirdly, if you are lucky enough to possess the Bow of the Griffin, as seen in this video, all 3 arrows loosed in the basic attack are affected by Rolling Draw, which will do up to 700% weapon damage to an enemy at point-blank range. Lastly, there are 2 ways to quickly identify if Rolling Draw is active. 1. There will be a small icon in your status area that is identical to the Leaping Shot icon. 2. Your bow will have a brightly glowing magic arrow loaded. Moving on. Stealth is an ability that really sets the Hunter apart as a ranged class. Stealth is a toggleable ability where the hunter throws a smoke bomb at his feet and vanishes from enemy view for 29 seconds, but will deactivate if toggled off or if you attack an enemy. It has a 24-second cooldown time and costs a low 20 stamina. It is a notable that the cooldown on stealth is variable, as doing damage to enemies reduces it. It also adds a huge 50% damage bonus to an attack performed that breaks you from stealth. The upgrade, Lost in the Shadows, makes you enter stealth immediately without any animation, which means you can also do it while running. Furthermore, this also purges negative status effects on you like Panic from the Demon Commander and Burning like from Wraiths or Rage Demons. This greatly improves the tertiary utility of stealth and is always recommended. Something to note about stealth. There are certain enemies that have a passive ability called Perceptive. The Perceptive trait means that if you are in stealth around that enemy with this perk, your stealth will deactivate. While I believe this only happens if the enemies look in your direction, it may happen just by being within a certain range. Examples of perceptive enemies include the Red Templar Commander and any canine animals added from the Destruction DLC. Finally, we have Hook and Tackle. Hook and Tackle is a mobility skill that allows you to grapple an enemy at distance and quickly launch yourself towards them. This is ideal for entering the battlefield quickly or tactically moving to key points. It is limited, however, by needing an enemy to target in order to be effective, so note where the enemies are before you want to use it. Hook and Tackle costs a low 20 stamina and has a 12-second cooldown. Something to note about Hook and Tackle. While the ability description mentions nothing about it, Hook and Tackle appears to do damage. While this is not a lot, if only slightly better than a basic attack, it is still adding to your overall DPS and is something you should account for. Now, let's get to those passives. First, we have Explosive Toxin. This essentially can extend the effects of Toxic Cloud near indefinitely, as each enemy that dies while under the effect of Toxic Cloud, including contact poison, will melt into a toxic cloud of their own, doing significantly higher 50% weapon damage per second for 8 seconds in a 6-meter diameter. It does not, however, benefit from contact poison by itself, so enemies have to be actively standing in these tertiary clouds in order to continue taking damage. Knife in the Shadows is the main optional passive for this build. Knife in the Shadows makes any attack from stealth automatically critical hit. This becomes more and more optional as your base critical chance becomes higher from acquiring better gear and attaining more rogue promotions. Easy to Miss is the second optional passive that is more reliant on the team around you. If you play largely in public matches, then you will want to take it. Easy to Miss lowers your overall threat by 25%, but completely eliminates your threat if you are flanking the enemies. This is extremely helpful for being able to get in close to enemies without being noticed, even out of stealth. There are a couple optional passives I will list here instead of those two. On Razor's Edge, this will increase all damage by 15% to enemies that are within 10 meters of you. This synergizes greatly with Toxic Cloud, which requires you to be within a 3-meter radius. Pincushion. This increases the damage of consecutive bow attacks by 5% for 10 seconds. If you use a basic attack once per second, this means that every basic attack after the 9th will do 50% more damage. It's a good, solid DPS increase for wearing down tougher enemies. It beats walking. The upgrade to Hook and Tackle, It Beats Walking, removes all stamina cost and cooldown for Hook and Tackle, making it infinitely spammable and always there when you need it. Now for strategy. This particular build for the hunter relies on a specific combination of ability use for maximal effect. When you spot an enemy group at a distance, note their formation. Find an enemy in the middle back of that group. Hook and tackle into that enemy to close the distance before anyone can react. Immediately cast Toxic Cloud, followed by Stealth. From here, you can either use Leaping Shot to deal massive damage to enemies. Your close proximity will maximize the damage from Leaping Shot, plus a damage bonus from Stealth, plus the auto critical from Knife in the Shadows. Or you can silently slip away, leaving the enemies choking to death on poison while a striker, like an assassin, comes in to finish them off. Now, unlike many class builds that I have done videos for in the past or will do videos for in the future that only benefit from higher level gear and a simple increase of damage, the Hunter is a unique class in that it benefits from a certain playstyle. Much of the various builds of him revolve around being much closer to enemies than other ranged classes, and thus will immensely benefit from the bow of the Griffin. This is not the best bow in the game. It does around 150 base damage, but it looses 3 arrows simultaneously in a flat conical pattern. At range, this has a very slim chance to hit multiple enemies, and ultimately becomes far inferior to higher damage bows. However, at close range, this has a great chance to hit a single enemy with multiple arrows, potentially doubling or tripling the basic attack. If you do not have this bow, do not worry, the Hunter will still play quite well. This is simply something to be aware of as you acquire more advanced gear. As always, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. Once again, this is Angelus DiMortiel signing off.